We're counting down the 10 smallest World War II-era snow vehicles that still run today. From propeller-driven sleds and improvised motorcycle conversions to rare tracked minis and field-modified trucks, these machines weren't just oddities, they meant survival in frozen war zones where bigger vehicles couldn't go. Ingenious, fragile, and nearly forgotten, each fought blizzards, sub-zero starts, and enemy fire. But which tiny survivor ranks as the ultimate snow machine of the war? Let's begin the countdown with number 10. Number 10 is the Soviet Aerosan NKL-16/41, a machine that looks more like an oversized toy plane than a war vehicle. Built from wood and fabric, it rides on skis and is pushed across the snow by a roaring aircraft propeller mounted at the back. With space for just 2 crew, a machine gun, and barely enough room for medical stretchers or extra gear, the Aerosan was designed for patrols, reconnaissance, and emergency evacuations over frozen lakes and marshes. In February 1942, one of these fragile sleds made a desperate dash across Lake Ladoga, rescuing 16 wounded soldiers after a German artillery strike. The pilot's diary from that mission describes the engine nearly freezing solid, forcing the crew to improvise mid-run while under fire. After the war ended, most Aerosans were deliberately destroyed. Soviet orders in 1946 called for burning surplus vehicles to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. Today, only a handful survive, mostly in museums, and even fewer can still taxi under their own power. The NKL-16/41 stands as a reminder of how thin the line between survival and disaster could be when technology met the Russian winter. A motorcycle stripped for winter is a study in battlefield necessity. On the Eastern Front, soldiers turned standard German and captured Soviet bikes into makeshift snow machines. Mechanics in field workshops swapped the front wheel for a wooden ski, bolting it on with steel straps and scavenged hardware. The rear wheel came off next, replaced by a narrow track bogie built from tank parts or agricultural chains. These conversions weren't pretty, but they worked, especially for night couriers running codebooks and urgent orders between isolated outposts. Karelian unit logs from early 1944 mentioned Snezhny motorcycle runs in blackout conditions, the rider hunched over the handlebars, engine muffled with rags to cut the noise. Soviet counterintelligence reports hint at these motorized ski couriers slipping past patrols, carrying messages no radio could risk. Period photographs show the rough welds and mismatched skis, each machine a unique answer to the same problem: how to cross deep snow quietly with just one rider and a satchel of documents. Today, a handful of museum replicas, rebuilt from battered frames and faded photos, can still sputter to life. A rare echo of the original field ingenuity that kept armies moving when the snow got too deep for anything else. In the snowy backroads of Quebec and Newfoundland, the Bombardier B-7 was never meant for war. Joseph Armand Bombardier's design, first rolled out in the late 1930s, put a warm, enclosed cabin on top of a pair of steerable front skis and a set of rear tracks. It could carry 7 people, or a full load of mail, across drifts that would swallow any car or truck. When the war came, these over-snow cabin cars quietly shifted from hauling villagers and mail to serving remote military outposts. Soldiers stationed in northern Canada and along the Atlantic coast used the B-7 to run supplies, evacuate the sick, and keep isolated bases connected when blizzards cut off every other route. One B-7 kept running by the Clark family in Newfoundland became a lifeline for their outpost. Maintenance logs show the same machine working winter after winter, patched together with scavenged parts and the occasional engine swap, surviving near disasters on thin ice. That B-7 didn't retire until the 1970s, and a handful of originals, restored by families and collectors, still rumble over the snow today. The B-7 stands out for its comfort and reliability, a rare blend of civilian ingenuity and wartime necessity that helped people survive winters no truck could face. A machine that looks like it belongs in a science fiction serial, the Kettenkrad SDKFZ-2 was both a motorcycle and a miniature half-track, built for the kind of terrain where even horses gave up. Designed by NSU and powered by a compact Opel 4-cylinder engine, It combined a motorcycle-style fork for steering with a set of tracked rear wheels, letting it pull loads that would bog down anything else its size. On the Eastern Front, Kettenkreder hauled 37mm anti-tank guns, cable reels, and ammunition sleds through snowdrifts and muddy fields, often serving at the front lines or airfields where bigger vehicles couldn't go. Its small footprint and low weight meant it could be loaded into gliders for airborne operations, dropped behind enemy lines, and put to work almost immediately. Wartime production ran from 1940 to 1945, with thousands built, but behind every chassis was a darker story. The NSU factory at Neckarsulm relied on forced labor, with prisoners working long shifts in freezing conditions, a fact that lingers uneasily around surviving examples. Today, many restored Kettenkreder still run at vintage events and in private collections, their odd silhouette instantly recognizable. For all its versatility and mechanical cleverness, the Kettenkrad stands as both a marvel of wartime engineering and a reminder of the human cost hidden in the machinery. The M29 Weasel began as a rescue solution for winter commandos, designed under Project Plow to carry men and supplies across the deep snowfields of Norway. Engineers at Studebaker built it light and narrow, with a simple flathead engine and wide tracks that floated over powder where trucks and jeeps just sank. The Weasel could be dropped by parachute, hauled by glider, or loaded onto a ship, making it one of the most versatile small vehicles of the war. By late 1944, these sled-like carriers were everywhere, crawling through the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge, hauling ammunition and wounded soldiers to and from the front. Reports from that winter describe Weasels running non-stop through snowdrifts that stopped even tracked tanks. Their engines coaxed to life each morning with blowtorches and cans of gasoline. Production topped 15,000 units, more than any other tracked snow vehicle of its kind. Variants like the M29C Water Weasel even added amphibious capability for swamp and river crossings. After the war, surplus Weasels found new homes in Arctic towns and mountain rescue squads. Restoration rosters today show dozens still running, some in the same snowbound villages they first served. The Weasel's legacy is one of mass production and adaptability, a small machine that proved size and numbers could win a winter war. When the Soviet winter swallowed roads and froze engines solid, the Studebaker US-6 became the backbone of northern supply lines, but only after field workshops transformed it into something the original designers never imagined. Delivered by the thousands through Lend-Lease, these 6x6 trucks were meant for all-purpose hauling, but deep snow in Karelia and around Murmansk brought them to a halt. Mechanics answered with a recipe as rough as the terrain. The front wheels came off, replaced by wide wooden or aluminum skis, often borrowed from crashed aircraft. Rear duals were wrapped with track belts, sometimes cobbled together from salvaged tank treads or agricultural chain. Soviet Order Number 42, issued in late 1942, laid out the basics, but every conversion was a little different depending on what parts could be scavenged. Convoy diaries from the Northern Front describe how these snow truck hybrids kept fuel and ammunition moving when everything else was buried or bogged. One entry from January 1943 notes a US-6 conversion reaching a forward fuel dump after 3 standard trucks had to be abandoned in drifts. The field-modded Studebakers were heavy, awkward on ice, and a nightmare to steer, but they worked. And in those conditions, working was enough. Out of the thousands shipped, only a handful of authentic ski track conversions have survived, and even fewer are still running today. Each is a rolling testament to frontline improvisation, showing how necessity and grit turned a standard truck into a lifeline across the frozen north. In the far north of Sweden, engineers faced a problem that no standard vehicle could solve: how to move men and supplies across endless snow without sinking or stalling. The answer, at least on paper, was a lightweight machine split into 2 small modules, joined by a central pivot. This articulated design let the front and rear sections flex independently, spreading weight so evenly that the whole vehicle could glide over deep powder. Between 1941 and 1943, Swedish military workshops built and tested these prototypes in Lapland, hoping to create a patrol carrier that could outmaneuver anything else in the Arctic. Reports from these trials describe the vehicle's uncanny ability to snake around trees and roll through drifts that stopped even tracked trucks. The pivot joint, a simple but clever linkage, is now seen as a direct ancestor of the post-war Hägglunds snowcats, the BV-202 and BV-206, machines that would later define Arctic mobility for decades. But in the middle of the war, Sweden's defense ministry hit a crossroads. Funding dried up as officials debated whether to keep developing the homegrown design or buy American M29 Weasels, which were becoming available through diplomatic channels. The prototype's promise wasn't enough to win the argument. Mass production never happened, and only a single chassis survived, tucked away in a military depot. Decades later, restoration teams brought that lone frame back to running order, using period test reports and engineering notes from the Swedish Defense Archives. It starts and moves today, though only at slow speeds for demonstration runs, a living blueprint for every articulated snow vehicle that followed. The Swedish prototype stands as a testament to innovation under pressure, a machine that almost changed winter warfare before disappearing into the files of a procurement debate. A small, boxy car rolling through a snow-choked forest seems out of place, but the Maschinenfabrik Tempo G1200 was built for the unexpected. Designed in Germany before the war, this ultralight utility car weighed less than many motorcycles and put its power, just 25 horsepower, straight to the front wheels. That front-wheel drive made all the difference on icy roads and packed snow, where rear-driven trucks spun helplessly. In Finland and northern Germany, the G1200 became a quiet favorite for winter courier routes and medical shuttles, especially in sectors where deep drifts sidelined heavier vehicles. Field logs from Lapland mention G1200s running urgent messages and ferrying wounded soldiers, often in convoys with sleds or other light transports. What set the Tempo apart wasn't brute force, but its ability to adapt. Manuals from the period describe how mechanics could swap out standard wheels for wider winter tires, and some post-war restorations added bolt-on ski and track kits, though wartime photos rarely show these modifications in action. The real trick was speed. With a simple chassis and easy-access engine, the Tempo could be winterized in a matter of hours, not days. Bolt-on skis replaced the front wheels for better steering over powder, while clip-on rear tracks, sometimes custom fabricated, gave extra grip where the snow was deepest. Unlike full-tracked vehicles, the G1200 could switch back to wheels as soon as the thaw came, keeping it on the move year-round. Restoration records from Germany and Finland list several surviving G1200s, some still running at vintage rallies, often sporting the same modular winter gear that kept them relevant in the 1940s. While it never matched the raw snow performance of a Weasel or Kettenkrad, the Tempo's blend of lightweight, front-wheel drive, and quick convert features gave it a unique edge. In the world of World War II snow vehicles, adaptability sometimes mattered more than raw power, especially when every lost hour could mean lives left waiting in the cold. Deep in the pine forests of Karelia, the smallest machines often carried the heaviest burdens. Finnish supply officers needed a way to move ammunition and food to frontline squads through snow too deep for trucks and too tangled for horses. The answer, at least for a handful of units, came in the form of tiny tracked tractors, nicknamed Sisu or Polar by the crews who coaxed them through the woods. Each weighed less than a motorcycle sidecar, ran on engines under 15 horsepower, and relied on ultra-low gearing to haul sled trains weighing up to a ton. Their secret was ground pressure so low, just 0.13 kilograms per square centimeter, that the tracks barely left a mark on the powder. What made these machines even more remarkable was the way they survived. After the war, when official spare parts dried up, local forestry cooperatives and village mechanics kept barter logs, quietly trading or hiding whatever pieces could keep a tractor running. In some cases, spare engines and track links were stashed in tool sheds or under firewood piles, far from the eyes of government inspectors. Oral histories from the Suomi Sled Club mention one such tractor running every winter from 1948 to 1972, its original engine replaced twice by whatever could be adapted, sometimes a boat motor, sometimes a chainsaw engine bolted to a homemade gearbox. By 2025, Saga, only 2 operational examples are known, both still running at vintage snow events in eastern Finland. Their design was never about speed or comfort, it was about getting through, no matter the snow or the silence of the forest. In the world of World War II snow vehicles, few machines delivered so much for their size, or survived so long on the loyalty and ingenuity of the people who needed them most. On the frozen edges of the Eastern Front, the smallest lifeline wasn't a tank or a truck, but a machine built to be just enough. The German San 3 Multia in its lightest snow-track courier form. The name means mule, and the role fit perfectly. Originally a standard Opel Blitz truck, the Multia became a half-track when mechanics swapped the rear axle for salvaged tank bogies and narrow tracks. In winter, some units added bolt-on steel skis to the front, transforming the vehicle into a snow courier that could slip through drifts where heavier trucks stalled and lighter sleds couldn't carry the load. Courier logs from Army Group North in January 1943 detail. Multia runs between supply depots and forward trenches, sometimes with just a 2-man crew and a half-ton of rations or mortar shells lashed to the flatbed. The narrow tracks spread the Multia's weight, keeping it afloat on powder snow, while the compact body let it squeeze down forest trails and between shell craters. Unlike the larger half-tracks, the lightest Multia builds could be dragged out of a ditch with a single tow rope or even pushed by hand if the engine refused to start at -30°C. Mechanics favored the flathead engines for their simplicity, field manuals recommended warming the block with a blowtorch before dawn, and depot records show that most repairs could be done with a wrench and a handful of spare bolts. Museum inventories in Germany and Russia list several operational Multia examples, each restored to original SnowRunner spec using period manuals and scavenged parts. Maintenance logs from the Deutsches Panzermuseum note that a 1944-built light Multia, chassis number 31247, still completes demonstration laps each winter, its tracks and skis wearing the scars of decades-old repairs. These survivors stand out not just for their rarity, but for what they represent: the best balance of size, payload, and reliability in any World War II snow vehicle small enough to hide behind a tree, yet strong enough to keep a front line supplied. In the world of winter warfare, the ultimate test was simple. Could you get through when everything else failed? The light Multia, with its narrow tracks and field-adapted skis, answered yes. And more than 80 years later, a handful still prove it every time their engines turn over in the snow. From the fragile, propeller-powered Soviet-era San to the compact but robust SDKFZ-3 Multia, our countdown of the 10 smallest World War II-era snow vehicles still running reveals a world of extreme ingenuity under fire. The biggest surprise? How much wartime survival depended on tiny, field-modified machines that could skim across snow where tanks and trucks failed. Across all entries, a pattern emerges: lightweight builds, simple engines, and improvisation. Whether it was a ski-bolted motorcycle, a Finnish micro-tractor towing a ton of ammo, or a half-track courier with just enough track width to float over drifts. Each vehicle on this list qualified for its surviving operational status and its ability to move more than just men, fuel, wounded, and hope, through blizzards and blackout nights. The real lesson is that in winter warfare, small size meant flexibility, repairability, and the difference between life and death. Today, the handful that endure are more than museum pieces. They are proof that even the humblest machines can shape history when the snow gets deep and the stakes are highest.